All right, let's get right into a story that really cuts to the heart of how we mistake sheer luck for genius. It's a tale about a very, very dangerous game, a huge fortune, and a pretty fatal misunderstanding of how the world actually works.
So, picture this. A millionaire, someone who is just unbelievably wealthy and maybe a little bored, comes up to you. He's not offering you a job or some hot stock tip. Nope. He's offering you a game. And that game is Russian roulette. He pulls out a revolver, shows it to you. You can see it for yourself. 5 of the 6 chambers are empty, but one has a very real bullet in it. The rules, they couldn't be simpler or more brutal. You put that gun to your head, you pull the trigger. If all you hear is a click, you get $1 million. It's a choice with, well, the ultimate stakes. And believe it or not, a young man takes the deal. He pulls the trigger. Click. He's alive. And now he's a millionaire. But he doesn't stop. He does it again. Click. That's 2 million. And then a third absolutely breathtaking time. Click. He walks away $3 million richer. He's a winner. So, of course, people flock to him, right? They're asking, what's your secret? And he doesn't say, I got lucky. No. He says he has skill. He says, oh, it's all in the technique. You just hold the gun at a slight angle. You see? He's mistaken a totally random outcome for some kind of repeatable strategy. He's been completely fooled by randomness. And that right there, that's what brings us to the core idea we're digging into. Why do we, just like that young man, so often feel the need to invent these stories of skill to explain what is purely 100% a matter of chance? Well, the author Nassim Taleb has a name for this. He calls it probability blindness. Our brains, they're basically wired to see cause and effect, to find patterns everywhere. We have a really hard time just accepting that sometimes things just happen. We crave a reason, a story, a technique. So here's the crucial point. We see the successful result, the $3 million, and our mind immediately starts working backwards. It creates this whole narrative of genius to make it all make sense. We just completely ignore the 5 other possible timelines where that story ended in absolute tragedy. So how does this whole deception play out on a bigger scale? Well, there's a really powerful cognitive bias at work here, one that systematically messes with our view of reality. It's called survivorship bias. It means we make our judgments based on the winners, the survivors, the success stories that we can actually see. And we do this precisely because the failures, well, they're usually silent and completely invisible. To really get how this works, we need to hop in a time machine. Back in World War II, the US military was desperate to add more armor to its bombers. So they did what sounds logical. They meticulously studied the planes that actually made it back from missions and mapped out exactly where they had been hit the most. Their conclusion? Reinforce those areas that were riddled with bullet holes. But a statistician, a guy named Abraham Wald, saw the massive flaw in their thinking. He pointed out that they were only looking at the survivors. The really important data wasn't in the bullet holes they could see, but in the ones they couldn't. The planes that got hit in the engines or the cockpit, the areas that were totally clean on the returning planes, those were the ones that never came back at all. They needed to armor the spots that had no damage. It's a brilliant counterintuitive example of this bias. This exact same bias can be weaponized. In fact, here's the playbook for a scam that creates the illusion of genius out of nothing. You start by emailing 1 million people. To half of them, you say a stock will go up. To the other half, you say it'll go down. By the end of the week, one of those is right. So you just throw away the list you were wrong for, and you do it again with the remaining 500,000 people. After just 5 weeks, you've got this core group of over 31,000 people who are absolutely convinced you're a stock market wizard. I mean, they've seen you make 5 impossible predictions in a row. What they can't see is the silent graveyard of the other 968,750 people you were wrong for. This bias tricks us into focusing on this tiny little sliver of reality, while completely ignoring what Taleb calls the graveyard of silent evidence, that vast number of failures that actually hold the most important lessons. So, we study the one Elon Musk, but we totally ignore the thousands of other brilliant entrepreneurs who had the same drive and talent, but went bankrupt. We see the one lucky roulette player, but we can't see the 5 ghosts standing right next to him. We get all excited about the one monkey in a million that randomly types a perfect sentence, and then we foolishly expect him to go write a whole novel. And the big consequence of all this, it's a deeply warped perception of reality. Our world appears to have way more geniuses and foolproof strategies than it actually does, simply because the countless failures that would give us a true sense of the odds are completely hidden from our view. Okay, so if we can't trust the success stories we see, how are we supposed to think? Well, the answer is to shift our focus away from single outcomes and start understanding probabilities and systems instead.
We have to learn how to tell the difference between signal and noise. The noise? That's the story of the Russian roulette winner, a strategy that worked one time but would fail spectacularly in almost every other version of history. A signal, on the other hand, is a strategy that's robust. It might not give you the flashiest result, but if you could run a simulation 1,000 times, it would succeed in the vast majority of them. That's the difference.
So what's the antidote here? How do we stop being fooled? It all starts with building up a fiercely critical mindset. The next time you see some stunning success, your very first question has to be, what am I not seeing here? That one question forces you to start separating what's real, repeatable skill from the huge influence of luck. It's about learning to spot a reliable signal, a strategy that works over and over, from the random noise of a one-off event. And maybe most importantly, it means you have to deliberately look away from the winners and go study the failures. That's where the real lessons about risk are buried.
And this all leads us to a really powerful quote from Taleb himself. Skepticism is the language of probability. You see, to think clearly in a world this random, you can't rely on certainty. You have to think in odds and possibilities. And that requires a really healthy dose of skepticism toward any single amazing outcome.
Which of course leaves us with a final big question. If all the visible success stories out there are actually a deeply flawed map of reality, one that's totally polluted by survivorship bias and pure randomness, then how are we supposed to navigate the future? How do we ever really know which risks are smart and which ones are just another game of Russian roulette in disguise?